In episode 9, in the immediate aftermath, Peter starts looking over Colin's body for anything he can find that might be of use, and Rose does the same thing with the female assassin. She finds the assassin's phone. Right after she does find it, it starts ringing, and it's Gordon Wick looking for an update. Rose fakes it, and Gordon can't tell, but Rose isn't quite convincing enough. Gordon starts getting suspicious, and he's able to figure out that the person on the other end of the cell phone is not the person he called, and he hangs up. They both then go run over to tell Chelsea that they got to get out of there because they can hear police sirens in the background, and they know it's only a matter of time before the police show up and take them in. But Chelsea refuses to. She's not leaving her partner behind. Maddie's also pretty upset. She's got shrapnel in her leg, and she asks all three of them, is it true what he said about my dad, about being involved in the Metro bombing? And Pete does not pull any punches and just says, yeah, he was involved. He was trying to kill Omar Zadar, but your dad isn't the only one involved. It's also Diane Farr and Gordon Wick. And they're planning another attack, and if we don't stop it in the next 24 hours, then more people are going to die. Maddie actually steps up and says, I can help. I mean, if I'm rescued, the president's going to want to talk to me. Question is, who can I trust? Pete likes the idea. He tells Maddie that she can trust President Travers. And even though he's hesitant to tell her she can trust Ben Almora, Chelsea says that she can. They then devise a plan where Peter and Rose are going to go off and try to get proof that Diane and the vice president had their fingerprints all over the Metro bombing. Chelsea is going to stay with Maddie. If they do find this proof, they're going to have to wait for Chelsea to reach out to them because the Secret Service is going to take her phone. Peter and Rose then run off. Chelsea and Maddie get their story straight. And shortly after getting into police custody, Chelsea and Maddie get escorted over to the vice president's house. Diane's the one who actually breaks the news to the vice president, along with Gordon Wick, who's in the room as well, that Maddie's been found. But she also breaks the news that 3 people were found dead. Colin Worley, Eric Monks, and some unidentified female. And Diane turns to Gordon Wick and says, I'm sorry for your loss, because she knows that it was his assassin. This situation has officially become a mess. Diane Farr's patience has run thin, and she asks Gordon Wick, where are we on tomorrow? Because tomorrow is the make good on the attack of Omar Zadar. Zadar is going to fly into the country, and they're planning to attack him and kill him as soon as he lands. Gordon assures the room that the plan is still on, everything should run smoothly. Diane's a little skeptical on that, and it's because so far these plans haven't worked. Now, it's worth mentioning that one of the reasons why Diane probably has had it up to here with Gordon Wick and all of this is because she actually wasn't in on the original planning to kill Omar Zadar. She was brought in after the fact. Late at night, after the Metro bombing, she was called by the vice president, and the vice president was with Gordon Wick, and they explained their plan to kill Omar Zadar. They brought Diane into it because they figured that if an investigation were to go down and people on the president's cabinet were called up to the Hill to testify, it wouldn't be good for the administration. And they knew that Diane Farr had such a loyalty to the president for all of the years they spent together. So Diane really was brought in to clean up their mess. And at this point, she's just flat out had enough. Seems like they're going to be at the finish line soon, but what she wants to do in the meantime is find out what Chelsea and Maddie know. Diane's going to lead up Chelsea's debriefing, and she instructs the vice president to find out what he can regarding Maddie's mental state. While those 3 wait for Chelsea and Maddie to show up, Pete knew that he needed a friend at that moment. With his face plastered all over the news, he was limited on where he could go, and he decided to go to his uncle's place. Luckily for Pete, his uncle truly doesn't believe that he had anything to do with Maddie's kidnapping, so he's more than willing to bring him into his house. This little respite allows Rose to try to crack into the female assassin's phone and find out any information she can. While she starts looking at the phone, Pete starts showing the dossier of all the information they've collected regarding the situation to his uncle, who, once again, is a former journalist, so he might be able to connect some dots that Pete wasn't able to. This, however, sparks an argument regarding their original falling out. Pete's uncle writing that article on his dad, Pete not taking too kindly to it, and it gets broken up when Rose enters the room and says, I cracked the phone. She found photos of her aunt, her uncle, the code names, all of that. But there are also pictures from the night action room. Pete recognizes it. Looking at the metadata, they're able to discern exactly when those photos were taken, and Pete remembers that he called out sick that day. Diane said that she would find someone to fill in. But now what they need to do is find out exactly who was in the room when those pictures were taken. And you have to scan in to get into the night action room. And those scans are kept on file. The good thing is that the only person who can change the logs and change who was in and out is Ben Almora. The bad news is you have to request those logs, and that means you have to be in the Secret Service. Chelsea might be able to do it, but they're waiting on Chelsea's phone call, and they don't want to wait any longer. So they're going to have to find somebody who can request the logs, and red flags won't go up. They decide to go with Diane Farr's assistant. They collect all their stuff, they get ready to leave. Peter's Uncle Jim is going to head down to his office and poke around, see if he can find out any information now that he has stuff to go on. And he tells him, if you find out anything else, send it my way. They then have a little bit of an awkward goodbye that involves a handshake, not a hug. And then Peter and Rose head to go stake out the apartment of Diane's assistant. While they're sitting in their car, Maddie has arrived back at home. When they finally get some privacy, Chelsea tells Maddie that the last time Zadar was in the country, the president gave him Secret Service detail. So if Zadar is the target, then the president would give him Secret Service detail again. Now she just has to find out who is on his detail and warn them about this impending attack. Problem is, she doesn't have her cell phone. And Maddie remembers that she has an old cell phone in the house. She just has to get it. As they're talking, though, there's a knock at the door, and it's the vice president and one of the higher-ups in the Secret Service. Normally, Ben Almora would be there to debrief, but he's not. He's on, quote, vacation. So unfortunately for Chelsea, it's going to be this dude that she doesn't really know, FBI Director Witt, and Diane Farr. While Chelsea's getting debriefed, the vice president is basically debriefing Maddie, trying to get any information he can on what she might know about the situation. And she does a really good job. She does tell her dad that this guy said he was behind the Metro bombing, but she also plays it off like she doesn't believe any of it. Now, in the other room, Chelsea's doing the same thing, and she also reveals to this trio about Colin Worley demanding that the vice president take accountability for the Metro bombing. And this is the first time that Director Witt has heard about this. Even though it does sound crazy, he does want to look into it, which is the last thing that Diane Farr needs. She tries to divert Witt's attention, saying that really shouldn't be a priority. I mean, this dude was delusional. But Witt reminds her that Worley was a suspect in the Metro bombing before he died, so he's interested to hear anything he has to say on the matter. Once Chelsea's let go from the debriefing, she goes to get her gun and badge back, but she also goes to find out who is on Zadar's detail. She asks one of the Secret Service agents if he can go look into the matter of her gun and badge, which opens up his computer. And when Chelsea looks into it, she finds that Ben Almora isn't on vacation. He's at Camp David. She then goes to Zadar's code name, and it just says that he's somewhere called Blair House. She doesn't really get a chance to dive too deep into it because Secret Service agent, along with the guy who was in her debriefing, come back, and Chelsea has to get up before she's caught. The whole time that Chelsea was away from Maddie, the vice president was, quote, protecting Maddie, making sure that his daughter was okay, but also just trying to spend a little time with her. He's realized that he's been a bad father. But at one point in the night, Maddie dozes off. And that's when Diane Farr comes to the room and tells the vice president, I need to talk to you. The thing is, Maddie didn't actually doze off. With her dad finally out of the room, Maddie feels like this is a pretty good time to go get that cell phone. Diane wants to know from the vice president what Maddie knew. He fills her in. And then he asks Diane about Chelsea, and she fills the vice president in on how that debriefing went and how now they have Willits looking into stuff. Diane tells the vice president that she'll once again clean up his mess because Diane still thinks she's in charge. But once she leaves the room, the vice president calls up Gordon Wick and says, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I'm on board. There's one condition. She's my daughter. I'll get her in line. He then starts talking about if, in a worst-case scenario, he'll just start issuing pardons the next night. This entire conversation is being overheard by Maddie, who was returning from grabbing her cell phone from the basement. And it's definitely got her curious as to what her father is up to. Maddie doesn't want to get caught, so she sneaks back to her room. But the problem is she left a clue that she had left her room. There was a little bit of blood on the banister that when the vice president finally exited the room that he was in, he noticed it. So while she's suspicious of her father is now suspicious of her. Now that Maddie has a cell phone, her and Chelsea use it to get in contact with Peter. Peter and Rose were able to get the jump on Diane's assistant, going into her apartment, duct taping her, and using her computer to get the access logs to figure out who was the one who got into the night action room the night that those pictures were taken. Sure enough, it was Diane Farr. As soon as they get this information, Peter tells Rose, "Send that to my Uncle Jim." And then he gets a phone call, and it's from Chelsea. He excitedly tells her that they found the information they needed that links Farr to the deaths of Rose's aunt and uncle. He then asks for an update on whether or not Chelsea's been able to get in touch with the president or Almora, and she tells him no. They went to Camp David on a last-minute trip, and Zadar's detail has him at a place called the Blair House, but she knows for a fact that Blair House doesn't have any plans for anyone to be there that week. Through talking it out, Chelsea realizes that must mean Zadar is headed to Camp David. At first, she doesn't think that there's any chance that anyone would put the president's life at risk, and that's when Maddie speaks up and says, "I heard my dad talking about handing out pardons tomorrow night. The only person who can hand out a pardon is the president." This really doesn't come as a surprise to either Peter or Rose. They found an email detailing how Diane was disinvited from the Zadar meeting, so they feel like the president might have been on to what Diane was up to, and she was keeping her out of the loop, and one of the ways she did so was by changing this meeting. Chelsea also thinks it makes sense because, as she puts it, Ben Almora must have put two and two together when he showed up on campus that day asking about who she was guarding the day of the Metro bombing. Now, they have to figure out a way to stop this. When Peter hangs up the phone, he tells Rose, "There's only one person I know that can call this off, and it's Diane Farr." So those two head over to Farr's apartment to wait her out. Meanwhile, Chelsea is still calling Ben Almora, but he's not picking up. She doesn't get a chance to game plan on how to get in touch with the president before the vice president enters the room and tells both Chelsea and Maddie, "You guys are coming to Camp David. The president wants to talk to you, and you have to come too." And knowing what they know about this possible attack of Zadar, neither of them are too thrilled to get the invite, but they also don't really have a choice. The next day, when they get on the helicopter, one thing that Chelsea finds really interesting is these two guys also get on. And Chelsea's never seen them before, and they're both carrying these big cases that look pretty important. Meanwhile, over at Diane's place, she enters in the wee hours of the morning, because she had stayed up all night long waiting for the confirmation that Omar Zadar was killed, putting an end to all of this, but she never got it. And when she never got it, she panicked. She went to her safe, she grabbed her cash, her passport. She was planning on fleeing the country. And as she was packing, she heard footsteps behind her, and she just figured that it must have been Gordon Wick's hit person. So she's pretty surprised when she turns around, and it's Peter. Peter demands that Diane call the attack off, put an end to all of this. The thing is, Diane tells Peter, "I don't know anything about this assassination attempt." And Peter thinks she's bluffing again. He starts talking about this assassination attempt on the president, and that's when Diane really gets concerned. She tells Peter, "I really don't know anything. Gordon Wick, the vice president, they shut me out. But if the president's in danger, I have to protect them." Those two took advantage of the fact that they knew I would never put Michelle's life at risk. She tries to get in touch with the president, calling her, but there's no answer. Even though they don't want to, they all need each other in this moment, and all three of them are heading to Camp David to hopefully call this attack off. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.